Hi everyone, thanks for watching. My name's Kate and I'm part of the team at CHASNZ, otherwise known as Construction Health and Safety New Zealand. So we have the Work Should Not Hurt initiative, which is a program that targets sprains and strains in the construction industry. Last year, as part of this initiative, we did a pilot trial which focused on using exoskeletons in roofing. And today we're going to be talking about that trial in the webinar. So for today, we've got a bit of an agenda. Initially, we're going to go around the panel and get them to introduce themselves and say why they got involved. Then Chris will be giving us an overview of the trial, including key findings. Chris and Arnold will then be giving us a demonstration of the exoskeleton in use. Then Dr. Kelly Dale will be taking us through the objective results, followed by Paul Stanley Bowden, who will be taking us through the subjective results from the roofer's point of view. Chris will then be taking us through next steps, and we will finish up with a quick couple of questions. So first up, I'll get Chris to introduce himself, and then we'll go around the rest of the panel.
Kia ora koutou, Chris Pilarchuk here, the resident ergonomist from Construction Health and Safety New Zealand. Look, we're looking at exoskeletons because they've been around for the last 5 years and showing extremely promising results to overcome some of these risks that we've been struggling with in construction. So really pleased to show you the results of our pilot today.
Thanks, Chris. Kia ora, I'm Kelly Dale. I've been fortunate enough to be included in this trial. I work with all sorts of organisations in terms of fatigue and well-being and capturing data to kind of understand sleep and stress and recovery and all of those sorts of good metrics. But that's predominantly been in the farming industry, shift workers, office-based workers. And so, yeah, I was, really pleased to be brought on board with this project because it's, one of the first that's been done in the construction industry here in New Zealand. So, we just don't have this kind of data and understanding. So, yeah, really pleased to be part of this project.
Good morning, everyone. Arno from Exovantage. So Exovantage is a fully integrated solution provider, and we increase productivity and well-being using exoskeleton technology. So in this specific environment, we will be talking about the roofers and the building industry in general, and how we can solve, ergonomic problem as well as business problems for New Zealand companies.
Hi, I'm Paul. I'm one of the three roofers involved in the trial. I probably got involved because I've been annoying Chris at various roofing association conferences over the last few years about manual handling and problems we have with accessing work areas. So he's probably put me in here to silence me. Thank you.
Great, thanks for that, team. So moving on into it, we've got Chris who's going to give us an overview of the trial and its background.
Thanks, Kate. Yeah, well, I mean, the trial was based on the concept of participatory ergonomics, and it's kind of a fancy name for just getting people involved in finding the problems and looking at the solutions. So we were lucky enough to engage with CS Roofing in Canterbury, and of course Red and Black Roofing and Paul Stanley Bowden. I roped him in. He never begged to come. I had to drag him over. It was the whole of the roofing team at CS Roofing. When we talked about strains and sprains and the available controls, they came up with the idea that we should really give these exoskeletons a real good practical run, because it showed a lot of promise to overcome some of the problems that we've been really struggling to come up with decent controls in. So we ran pre-trial workshops, and the roofing boys helped us come up with our research questions in that time. They also contributed to our post-trial evaluation workshop. So we chose 3 roofers for this pilot trial. we were kind of wanting to have a certain demographic on these roofers though. So one of our roofers is looking to extend their career in roofing, to be not so so much suffering from the wear and tear of years on the tools. Another one of our roofers is newer to the industry, and we were looking at the possibility that using an exoskeleton will help him reduce the wear and tear on his body over his career. And our third roofer, unfortunately, did have an ongoing back condition. So we were really interested to see how the exoskeleton would work with somebody who's actually struggling with things. Our trial was structured with 24-hour heart rate monitoring under the great supervision of Dr. Kelly Dale. And we had that heart rate monitoring on our roofers 24/7 for 1 week without the exoskeleton. So we measured a normal week and a week with the exoskeleton. From that, we actually collected a whole lot of objective data, which from the 24-hour heart rate monitoring, which Kelly will talk about, a whole lot of subjective data based around the trade of roofing, which Paul will talk about later, and just some practical data for myself, such as, do these things fit with a roofer's kit, with a roofer's tool belt? How do they work with Paul Stanley Bowden's trousers, for example, where he keeps his tools? How do they work when it's cold, when it's wet, etc., etc. So basically the trial was, we measured a normal week. We measured our roofers for a normal week of work without the exoskeleton to get some baseline data about how they were faring. And then we measured them during the whole week with the exoskeleton so we could compare the two results.
Great, thanks for that, Chris. I think one thing for me that was really cool about this trial is that it is really the first of its kind in New Zealand. Nothing like this has been conducted before. So it's been fantastic seeing it grow and seeing the results, as we'll get into shortly.
Yeah, cheers,
next
Kate.
Next up, we've got Chris and Arnold, and they're going to take us through for a bit of a demonstration with how to use the exoskeletons that were used in this trial. So over to you, Chris and Arnold. Chris, you're on mute again, mate.
But here's our three roofers that we chose for the trial in no particular order. This is just to show that actually the exoskeletons, the two we tried, fit very well with a traditional roofer's harness and a traditional roofer's tool belt. And also we tried them out on Paul Stanley Bowden's fantastic tool belt pants, which he'll talk about a little bit later. Now we just want to show you a video of the membrane roofing to start off with, and this is Paul actually wearing the exoskeleton at work on the left. Now, as you see, this is his predominant work position. This and basically being on all fours. Now, this position has worried us for quite some time, and we think it contributes to the amount of back and knee and shoulder problems that roofers suffer from. So this will be Paul's predominant work position throughout the day, laying a membrane roof. And as you see there, he's in that all fours position, putting lots of stress on his body, and even raising his blood pressure as he's dropping his head down and working in a low position. So anything we can do to help him in this position would be beneficial. So let's have a look at our demo. We're here to just show you the exoskeletons we used in the trial. So I'm already outfitted with the exoskeleton that Paul used, and we trialed this exoskeleton for the membrane roofing. It just varies slightly in color. It's now black instead of blue. So I have it on with a pair of shorts, and I actually kind of like wrapping the exoskeleton around my legs without my shorts underneath, but we have since tested that it is good with longer shorts. So pardon me for my short shorts in this one. Just want to describe to you that this is extremely light. It's about 1.2 kgs. I can't even really feel it on my body. It's very streamlined around here, as you see, and doesn't actually protrude very much. So it's actually reasonably good in and out of tight spaces, as it is this way. Arnold, how about the movement that it can help in?
Sure, right. So this exoskeleton is good when you are on your knees. The spring system is designed for you to be in this position. It is sort of 30% more flexible than the other model that we're going to go through later. But this one, when you are in this position on your knees, it's really good that you've got the support going forward. And then when you go up on your feet, it sort of springs you up as well. So it helps you to, so it's kind of the two actions. It's when you are sort of reaching forward and leaning, you are supported, but also when you are coming up on your feet, it helps you to springs you up onto your feet, which makes the movement better. Yeah.
Yeah. So what I can feel here when I move down is actually around my shoulders here. I'm almost weightless here and suspended. So it's keeping me up like that. And even when I go down and put one arm out, it's still actually supporting me, putting less pressure through my arm. So it actually takes quite a lot of the strain out of your back, transfers it all into your legs, but makes that effortless in this position. And then, as Arnold says, as I get up, I'm totally assisted in that movement by the springing nature of the exoskeleton.
One feature which is attached to the exoskeleton is this strap here, which we call the red strap, just because there is a red line on it. But the more you pull this strap here on both sides, and the more the level of support increases. So if you are just sort of bending forward about sort of 5 degrees, you want to be able to pull those two straps so that it kicks in straight away. If you need more flexibility as you get on your knees, you want to release the straps like this, which frees the spring system and allows you to have less tension and more flexibility. So it really depends on the height and your level of comfort as well. Everyone is different.
And I think as you work during the day and as you get more and more tired, that could actually be a really good feature, because the exoskeleton, you can make it actually kick in quite a lot more.
Yes.
So yeah, it does have a lot of variability. So that's a hell of a lot more support for me on that tighter adjustment as they come up.
Yes.
Yeah, excellent. So that's the exoskeleton for the membrane roofing. Okay, well, the other part of New Zealand roofing, and probably one of the bigger parts of New Zealand roofing, is the metal roofing industry, and especially the commercial guys, and the predominant sort of posture of concern, I guess, or work position of concern is this position that you see on the right hand side here. So let's just play that video. As you see, this is screwing off a long run roof, which is extremely repetitive and tedious, and the position is predominantly a stooped position. And what happens in the stooped position, as you bend over further, your back muscles stop actually supporting your weight, and to the end parts of your stoop, you're actually sort of hanging by kind of your tendons and your ligaments and your spine that are kind of holding you up. So this is a very risky position for low back pain in roofers. So let's have a look at that exoskeleton that we tried for these guys. Kia ora whanau. Now we're going to show the exoskeleton that we use for the metal and the commercial roofers, and Arnold's actually going to show us how easy it is to get it on.
So you will usually having on your coat hanger to keep it easy to to take it on and off. But essentially, it should really take you about 10 seconds. You put it on like a backpack, so just like that. And you should have four clicks. So one at the chest, the belt, which goes around here, and then your thighs, so one on each side. So it goes around. So that's number 3. Number 4 goes there. And then what you do is you tighten the straps on your bum, and you want those to be firm, because that provides you with the support that you need. I like to tuck those away under here so they don't get caught in anything. And essentially this is when the exoskeleton is disengaged. So as you can see, there is no support or no tension. When you want to engage the exoskeleton, you put those two mechanisms down here, and now the exoskeleton is engaged. And so when I'm in that position, I am completely suspended. So I no longer support my own weight, and whatever I'm carrying with me would be kind of half the weight.
So I think this is a very important feature of this exoskeleton, that it's able to be engaged and disengaged. So if you don't want that support, you can just disengage it and continue with your activities during the day. So hell of a lot more adaptable.
So ladders, platforms, if you're sitting in your car, a brake, you want to disengage so that it frees the spring system. Forklift driving, if you have to hop on a forklift or truck, you want to be able to be free. So it's an easy, if you are going to be on the roof all day, you don't need to engage or disengage the system. You just leave it on. You can walk with the exoskeleton activated most of the time. It's only when you need to sit or be on a, take a ladder or a platform that you would want to disengage it. One other feature again is the red strap here. So as you pull, you increase the level of support. So here I'm suspended about sort of 5 degrees onwards if you are working at that height. But if you want to go further down, you want to release the system and have more flexibility so that I can go lower towards my toes. So it's really about the level of height that you are currently working at.
So we've been experimenting with drill extensions for roofers. So what we're finding is that you may actually be stooping anywhere between this height and really low down. So you need that adjustability to, depending on the pitch of the roof that you're working on and your drill setup. Yeah.
Yep.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Chris. Next up, we've got Dr. Kelly Dale, who's going to be taking us through the objective results for the trial. Over to you, Kelly.
Thanks. So I guess my kind of role in it was really trying to understand what was going on internally, what was going on with the physiology. And so we're able to do that with some tech, which is known as a first beat device. And the first beat is used throughout the world. So it's extensively used kind of in Europe, in the States, and we're starting to kind of use it here in New Zealand. And so the first beat is a clinical grade ECG, which is the gold standard for measuring heart rate and heart rate variability. And so essentially what we're doing is we're measuring the nervous system, so the autonomic nervous system, so that we can understand how much stress load is going on, how much recovery is going on during the 24-hour up to a week monitoring. What does the sleep look like? So how much sleep is going on, and more importantly, what is the quality of that sleep? And then also it has a built-in accelerometer so that we're able to measure physical activity and overlay that with the heart rate data to understand around the intensity of activity that's going on. And so, but this was, really the first time that we'd used any kind of objective monitoring in this sort of setting to really kind of understand what the load was that was going on for these roofers and also, in the construction industry. And so really kind of novel, and we didn't really know, what would the potential benefits physiologically be of the exoskeleton. And so that was, kind of what we were really interested in looking at. And I guess it's taking an understanding before we get injuries, before we get kind of some of these endpoints, that we're trying to prevent. How can we have an understanding around what the loads are like so that we're getting in front of injuries and back injuries and all of the rehabilitation that, that goes along with it. And so we had the participants wear the monitor. So it was attached to the body with electrodes. And so just on the chest region, the participants wore it for a week, as Chris mentioned, a week doing their usual kind of roofing work duties so that we could understand what does a typical kind of week look like, so that we could understand what does sleep look like, what does stress and recovery look like, how active are these roofers. And then we asked the participants to then also wear the first beat device with the exoskeleton for about a week so that we could do a direct comparison and go, are we making any difference to stress and recovery levels? Are we making any difference to the sleep and the quality of the sleep, and how active are our participants? And look, acknowledging that, we only had 3 participants, so it is a small trial, and we're certainly not saying that this is, a complete understanding of what's going on. But actually, really, we just wanted to understand, would participants kind of wear the device? What would the data look like? Just to kind of give us some insights so that we could start to kind of explore this, and then from there, look at, what else do we need to kind of complete the picture. Yeah, so now I'll talk about some of the results that we had. So as I mentioned, the first beat device used around the world, and we've got hundreds of thousands of individuals that have worn the first beat and collected data. We're using them with farmers, as I've mentioned, and we use them a lot with office-based workers. But like I said, this is kind of the first time in the construction industry. But so we don't really have kind of comparisons that we can make within the construction industry to go, what does this data look like in comparison to, this industry in general? What does this look like in comparison to scaffolders or, kind of other, trades? But what we can do is we can compare the data that we've collected to this big international database, acknowledging that it will be a mixture of all sorts of kind of shift workers, office-based workers. And so, but, it's interesting for us to go, how does roofing perhaps compare across the board, kind of with work in general? And so we've got these, this great international database to make comparisons with. But if we start just with, say, the week without the exoskeleton, so our baseline week, just to kind of understand what does potentially a typical week look like with our 3 roofers, we can see here on the screen their first beat life score, which is kind of their overall kind of well-being score. And we can see that in that baseline week, they were sitting about fairly good. So about a score of 59 out of 100, which is kind of sitting about the average that we've got for in that international database. But what was really interesting and quite promising was that when we repeated it with the exoskeleton, we can see some real lifts there in that overall well-being, acknowledging that it's only 3 participants, but quite a substantial lift from 59, pushing them up into this good category of well-being up in the 70. And when we kind of drilled down and we looked at the individual metrics that we were looking at, we could see that there were lifts across the board. So we looked at stress and recovery balance. And so when we're looking at stress and recovery balance, what we're saying is how much stress is a person experiencing and how much recovery are they getting. And so we're certainly not coming in and going, we don't want anyone to experience any stress. What we're really kind of looking at is what is the balance between stress and recovery. So if a person's experiencing stress, and we all experience stress, be it work-related, external factors, that sort of thing, what the key kind of critical part is that we've got a good balance with recovery so that we can recover from the amount of stress that we're experiencing. And so what we could kind of see, which was, perhaps, I'm not going to say concerning, but I guess insightful, was that balance between stress and recovery, was lower than kind of what we see from that international database. So without the exoskeleton, it was sitting down at about 42 out of 100. And we can see there was some lift with wearing the exoskeleton, and our participants were able to lift that to about 48 over 100. But, I guess kind of the key takeaway from that was that even though we lifted it, it was still kind of, substantially lower than the balance that we see kind of from that big international database. So, perhaps a takeaway is that the exoskeleton can help with that balance, but is there other things that could be done, kind of within the industry to help balance that stress and recovery load for roofers? So that's kind of, one kind of, I guess, insightful result from the study. The other thing that's, really critical, especially when we're thinking about injuries, is sleep. And so we know that sleep, when we sleep, especially deep sleep, that's when we're getting a lot of this physical recovery and repair that's going on. And so, that kind of speaks to kind of two groups. One, preventing kind of injuries. So if we're getting enough good quality sleep, that has fantastic benefits in terms of enhancing or helping our reaction times, our coordination, and so really kind of helps to prevent injuries. And then secondly, if we are putting our bodies under significant kind of loads and at risk for injuries, that sleep helps our bodies to repair and recover from that load. And so if we're not getting enough good quality sleep, especially that deep sleep, we're really kind of starting the next day not properly recovered, and also setting ourselves up for potential injuries. So, so sleep was, really important for us to kind of understand and measure. And so the key kind of overall around the restorative effect of sleep is looking at both the quality of that sleep and also the quantity of that sleep. So how much sleep and how good is that sleep? And so we can see without the exoskeleton that it was sitting kind of about 52 out of 100, which is fairly good, but still kind of, reasonably lower than kind of that international database sitting kind of in the early 60s. So again, highlighting, potentially some concerns around sleep and without the exoskeleton. Really pleasing to see with the exoskeleton, quite a significant lift there, not statistically significant because we had a small sample size, but, quite a profound lift in terms of the restorative effect of sleep. And so lifting that up to kind of 63 out of 100, but still acknowledging that that's only fairly good. And again, perhaps like the stress and recovery, there's still potentially some work to be done there around sleep, just because it's so important around injuries. And Chris obviously is all over that, understanding, kind of how significant that is, kind of in this industry. Not surprisingly, the group was very physically active. And so we can see without the exoskeleton, good score of 82 out of 100. And we can see that with the exoskeleton, that lifted to 98 out of 100. So quite a bit higher than kind of that international database. And you know, that's not surprising because of the nature of the work. But I guess what I found kind of really interesting was that participants were able to be more active. And so does that lend to them being more productive? You know, so I guess there's no firm conclusions that we can make, but it's perhaps highlighting that if there's better balance between stress and recovery, their sleep's improved, are they able to kind of at work be more active, get more done, you know, and so, you know, it points to some positives there. And then, you know, as we've kind of mentioned, we measured heart rate, and a lower heart rate is indicative of a person that has better stress and recovery levels, is sleeping well, is physically fit. And so, you know, a small decrease, but it kind of it lines up and it matches what we're seeing across the board. The data is all pointing, you know, to the same thing. You know, that there's some benefits here in terms of the exoskeleton. So what we've kind of done here is we've drilled down a little bit into the data. And so here we've got the sleep. And so I was, you know, I measure a lot of sleep with a lot of different industries, everything from drivers and shift workers and farmers. And so I've got kind of a bit of a gauge around different kind of industries and what sleep looks like. And I was quite pleasantly surprised at the amount of sleep that our participants were getting. And certainly not saying that this is, you know, 100% indicative of, you know, kind of the roofing sector across the board. But, you know, really pleasing to kind of see with our participants the length of sleep that they were getting. So that's, you know, kind of one of those really important metrics, giving themselves enough time to, you know, to experience the benefits of sleep. And so without the exoskeleton, getting about 7.5 hours, with the exoskeleton bumping it up to about, you know, over 8 hours. And so that really, you know, puts our participants in kind of that excellent kind of reference range for sleep. But it's interesting, you know, that they were able to get more sleep with the exoskeleton. Was it because they were less sore, you know, from wearing the exoskeleton? So it meant that they were, you know, more comfortable during the night and able to, you know, have a longer length of sleep. Not sure, you know, kind of we can't really answer that question, but, you know, it's really positive that they were able to get more sleep. And alongside that, when they were sleeping, they were getting more recovery. And so that recovery is that, you know, really critical piece in terms of restoring the individual, helping their bodies to repair, setting them up for the next day. And so we can see that there was, you know, some lifts there from 57% in the recovery state up to 63%. But, you know, kind of like we saw on that previous slide, those overall scores for sleep were still kind of not ideal, and there's still some potential there to kind of improve the recovery of sleep. So, you know, we're in that moderate range, but, you know, what are some other little things that we could do to help enhance that recovery and then have those positive flow-on effects in terms of injuries, well-being for our roofers, really helping them to feel good and you know, ready for the next day. So you know, benefits in terms of sleep, you know, with wearing the exoskeleton. We can also see alongside a lowering of the heart rate, we can see there was a slight improvement in heart rate variability. And so the higher the heart rate variability, the better functioning of that nervous system. So the more resilient our nervous system is. our nervous system, a resilient nervous system is able to cope with the stresses and the challenges of the day and then get into recovery mode. And so, a slight lift there, is positive and in line with what we're seeing across the board with the benefits from wearing the exoskeleton. And then in terms of the physical activity, and so as I've kind of mentioned, an active type of work. So it wasn't surprising that we saw really high kind of physical activity scores, but the lifts that we saw in terms of the health effects of the physical activity they were doing really came from an increase in that moderate intensity movement that our participants were doing when they wore the exoskeleton. And so, is that they've now got the physical kind of capacity to, do more moderate intensity exercise, be it going to the gym or going for a run, or are they able to, increase and the intensity at work? We can't necessarily, pinpoint, what's happening, but we can see that our roofers, had greater capacity for more moderate intensity exercise. And we know kind of from a lot of research that, that this moderate intensity exercise has physical health benefits, but also, really important mental health benefits. And so really kind of supporting the well-being and the long-term kind of physical and mental health, of roofers. And so, that was, kind of really pleasing to see, that there was improvements or ability there to kind of to lift that. So, yeah. Look, I won't spend kind of, really kind of any time kind of on this because it's, it's everything that I've kind of gone over in a bit more detail. But, and it's something that you can perhaps refer back to. But really, kind of objectively, physiologically, we saw some real benefits with such a small sample size. We saw some, really good benefits of the exoskeleton across the board in terms of stress and recovery levels, being more physically active and critically, some improvements there in sleep. So, objectively, beneficial. So.
Okay, thanks, Kelly. So aside from the heart rate monitoring, we also gathered subjective data through the use of a survey and a end of trial kind of toolbox talk. And all three of our roofers, their answers can be seen in our report, which is available on our website. But to present to you his experience, we've got Paul here with us today. So take it away, Paul.
Thank you very much. Yeah, just as a bit of background on the landscape I'm working on compared to the steel guys who are pretty much balancing on bits of timber on steep roofs, I'm working on a nice flat, even surface. So it's from that point of view, it's a nice place to be. On the downside, the materials I'm dragging up onto the roof can be 45 kilograms and heavier, which puts a wee bit of strain on the frame, getting them up there. A lot of the work is done in the kneeling position, as you would have seen from that video. I have worked out that probably spending more time on my knees than on my feet, and I'm doing something like a simple double garage. I'm crawling for about half a kilometre a day. A lot of the work's is a lot of arm extension work. You're holding tools out in front of you as you're crawling along. So again, there's strain on the shoulders, neck, forearms, etc. And as I said, there is an awful lot of crawling involved. So the back and the knees, the shoulders and the arms are all carrying a fair bit of load, which is relatively unnatural, I think you'd say. Impressions of the exoskeleton was it's certainly comfortable to wear. It's there, and that's probably because it's doing its job. So if you're not noticing it, it's probably not helping you very much. So at the end of the day, you don't forget you're wearing it, but you are definitely aware that it's assisting you or resisting you, depending on what actions you're trying to take. the amazing sensation when you first bend over with it is you feel like you're hovering over the work area. It's totally supportive. You almost just sit there and relax. Almost, it's quite an unusual sensation. And as a result of that, there's zero lower back pain. The other huge advantages it has is that it does the balancing and support for you. As you would notice again from that video, I've got tools in both hands, which means one hand is, whilst working in the machinery, is also holding me up and supporting my shoulders. With this thing, I don't need that. It's all done. My hands are free to do the work, which again reduces quite a lot of strain on my forearms particularly. Exoskeleton also kind of forces you into the vertical all the time, which again, because you spend a lot of time bending over and hunched and crouched, you almost stay that way when you stand up. But with the exoskeleton, I found my posture kind of improved a little bit. It was again, which again takes a little bit of strain off the lower back, I found. There's a couple of other bonuses I discovered when I was using it. One of them was lifting. As I mentioned, the rolls of membrane I pick up are about 1.5 meters long. They weigh 45 kilograms. So in order to get them on the roof, you need to get them on your shoulder, and you do that by balancing one end on your shoulder, bending your knees, and lifting the other end. With the exoskeleton, it really assisted with that lift. It almost felt like it was throwing it on your shoulder for you. It was suddenly made something that's quite difficult and definitely requires a bit of technique a lot easier. And bending and standing. A lot of everything's lying around on the roof. You're needing to pick things up all the time, move them to the next location. With the exoskeleton, that bending process, again, so much simpler. You didn't find by the end of the day that you're shuffling things along with your feet or crawling over the plate around the roof rather than standing up, because the skeleton was taking all that strain away and you weren't so tired. And again, just standing up, you are often knees up on your feet, walk somewhere else, bend down again. By the end of the day, normally you're not doing that. You're just crawling because it's just so much easier than standing up. But with the exoskeleton, it kind of encouraged that behavior. It was very, very, it was great actually. A little bit of difficulty, I suppose, was working in confined spaces. A lot of the work, or some of the work, can be lying prone, trying to get into an awkward area. Exoskeleton is not ideal for that, but probably is not designed for that anyway. But you almost felt like you could quite easily get stuck when you were wearing it. Again, and multi-plane work, balancing on some timber, maybe working around a chimney is probably a good example. You'd be working above yourself, above your centre of gravity, and then below it. In those situations, I almost felt like it was wanting to throw me off the roof. And scaffolding in general. Scaffolding is really good at stopping us falling off roofs, but getting up to the scaffolding, getting onto it, has never been particularly helpful. With the exoskeleton, again, trying to transition from the ladder onto the flat work surface, at times you felt like the exoskeleton wanted to throw you back onto off the scaffolding. And of course, there's always the bits that stick out, which catch on all the straps and things. Not a criticism of the exoskeleton, it's more a criticism of access we have on scaffolding. Stairs makes life so much easier, which is where I started annoying Chris in the first place. And access to my tools. As Chris mentioned, I have these Swedish floor layer trousers, which I got to reduce the amount of weight you carry around on your hips with tool belts, which are fantastic. They're really good. They got all the right stuff there. It saves me having to carry around picking up stuff and here carrying big tool belts, but it doesn't work that well with the Exo because it traps pretty much everything I had. I'm guessing a bit of intelligent design can fix that problem too. So, I do think it's a tool. It's one of those pieces of equipment that you wear when you need it. Like all tools, it doesn't solve every problem, but it solves a big hunk of the soreness, the aches and pains, and just doing the job well, really. To be honest, I really, really like it. At the end of the day, and by the end of the day, I mean 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock, when you're kind of running out of energy, you've still got 200 meters of seams to weld, and you're looking for reasons not to do it. I found with the exoskeleton, I was more than happy to just keep going because I knew it wasn't going to hurt when I was finished or while I was doing it. So, yeah, again, less pain, more enthusiasm to keep working, and a lot less crawling and footwork. And by footwork, I mean sliding stuff across the roof or kicking it across the roof because you really can't be bothered bending down and picking it up. So, in short, I absolutely loved the thing. It was brilliant. Back to you guys.
Thanks, Paul, and thanks for your feedback. Next up, we've got Chris, who's going to take us through the next steps and where our kind of next trials are going.
Yeah, thanks, Kate, and thanks, Paul and Kelly, for your for your reports, because it actually fills us with great enthusiasm to take the plunge and repeat a larger trial for the roofing industry. This time we'll take Paul's advice and do it in the summery months, which is something that we learned. If you want to trial these sort of things in construction, pick some finer months. I'm not sure if global warming will let us have those again, but pick a finer month, and we're going to repeat it in 2024 in summer. We're going to probably expand our sample group, hopefully up to around 8 roofers, so we can get a nice chunkier sample. And what we're probably going to do is we're also going to this year investigate another pilot trial in scaffolding and flooring. And hopefully we can get around about 8 participants in each of those trials and bring all this data together, which Kelly said is totally unique to our industry. And that data together will give us a lot more appreciation of the benefits of these exoskeletons. But I think on the face value, you've heard there's a hell of a lot of promise on these things. The new trial that we're going to run with roofers, we're going to trial a new exo suit, and I think we've got a picture of it there, Kate, while we're on the next slide. So the new suit you see here is modelled by one of our roofers, and it's called the exo suit. So it actually hasn't got an external skeleton framework attached to it. I might let Arnold give us a little bit of a rundown of it as well. But just for my point, I'd like to say the exo suit seems extremely promising because it overcomes some of the bulkiness and will work a lot better in the confined spaces that Paul was describing. It's also lighter, however, it does not give as much support as the exoskeletons that we trialed, as the Harpo exoskeletons with the external framework. Arnold, have you got anything to add to the exosuit?
Yes, Chris, I think it's always balancing comfort and support, right? So, and I think based on your workstation, you would be picking whatever you feel is achieving the sweet spot between comfort and support, because stooping requires a lot of belts, etc. You would want to go with a more streamlined type of design where so an exosuit as opposed to an exoskeleton, which is sort of bulkier, more support but bulkier as well. So I feel that this new trial will give us some really good data in terms of reaching both the level of support and comfort that those roofers would like to achieve. Yeah, so that's what we're going to measure with that new trial.
Yeah, that's fantastic, and I guess that translates to the level of protection that these things give you. So yeah, there's a real compromise there. However, looking extremely positive, and you can see the smile on the roofer's face here when he's trialing that on, because it's actually so light and so comfortable to wear.
Fantastic. Well, thanks, Chris. So that takes us into the questions section. So we had 2 questions sent through to us. First of all, and this kind of popped up around a lot when we shared the report as well, and I'm guessing, Chris, you can answer this one for us. It was the question as to why it was such a small sample size and what was the reasoning behind that.
Great one. Well, first off, a pilot study is usually a smaller sample size because it's really a putting our toes and testing the water. So we did achieve that. There is quite a lot of work running a 24-hour monitoring trial, as you'd imagine, and getting 3 roofers measuring a week on and a week off exosuit. So did take quite a lot of effort, but knowing what we know now and having the skills and having these really good partnerships that we've got with the roofing companies and with Exovantage, we're quietly confident that we can boost up our numbers of the next sample group and and get some more meaningful data out of that.
Okay, thanks, Chris. And we got one more, and I think Arnold, you can help us with this question. People wanting to know if they're interested in getting an exosuit or an exoskeleton, how do they go about it, and what's the kind of rough cost?
Sure. So always depends on the size and the complexity of the company or the organization. So some companies have sort of 3 or 6 staff. Some have 20, 50, 200 staff. So we deploy the packages based on how many staff would benefit from the different exoskeletons that we do have. But if you take it back to like as one person willing to purchase an exoskeleton or an exosuit, the last one, for instance, the last exosuit that we were seeing here would be about $850 plus GST. And then as you go towards the exoskeletons, you are going into sort of $2,500 for an exoskeleton. But again, the more you are purchasing, the lower the price gets. Yep.
Fantastic. And with that, we'll sign it off. But first of all, I'd just like to say a massive thank you to our panel. Thank you all for your time, your knowledge, your effort, both throughout the trial and with today. I'd also like to thank the other 2 roofers that took part in the trial, Jenny Maxwell from CS Roofing Canterbury and Roofing Association New Zealand. Without all of your guys' support, the trial couldn't have been possible. So thank you all. And if you guys have, anyone watching has any more questions or wants to get in contact with us about the trial, our contact details are either up on our CHASNZ website or the Work Should Not Hurt website. Sweet. Thanks, team.